Welcome back to Alpha Finance, where money mindset meets financial strategy. So today I want to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, particularly saving money and the best way of how to do this. So typically when people talk about saving money, they always talk about budgeting first, and it's something that I completely do not understand and I do not agree with. I think that being able to effectively budget is based on having the right sets of foundational principles. And so today I'd rather talk about what those foundational principles are and why they make it easier for you to save money. So getting right into it, let's talk about foundational principle number one, which is tracking your finances. Now, most people would say, well, I roughly know what I spend and I roughly know what I earn, so then what could be the added benefit to tracking my finances beyond that? Or people think that tracking your finances and making a budget are the same thing. They are not. When you make a budget, you're purposely trying to force a certain path of spending. But when you track your finances, you're simply just an observer into your spending and you're making that data available to you. And there's a lot of auxiliary or extra benefits that you get just from simply doing that and not making a budget. So I want to talk about a few of those today. The first of the examples that I'm thinking of goes back almost 100 years to the 1920s. Here in the United States, there was a series of studies conducted by researchers in some factories in Illinois. These researchers, they went to these factories and they tried to perform a series of studies known as the illumination experiment that would attempt to figure out if there were any optimizations that they could do at these factories to try to get increased productivity out of the factory workers. So in these series of experiments, in the illumination experiment, they would play with the lighting of these factories to see if it would have any effect on worker productivity. First, they increased the lighting, right? They made the lights brighter at this factory, and then they observed the changes in productivity. And what they saw was an increase in productivity due to the lighting. Okay, cool. Then they dimmed the lights at the same factory, and they saw a increase in productivity as well. So they increased the lights, saw an increase in productivity. They decreased the lights, and they saw an increase in productivity. And so the researchers would say, must be a fluke. It can't particularly mean much of anything. And so they stopped this observation. What they observed at the factories, or what they were told by the foremen and the people who worked there, is that the factory productivity went back to normal after they stopped observing this particular factory. So they went back, they performed the experiment again, and they saw the same results. Increase in productivity when they increased the lights, and an increase in productivity when they decreased the lights. And so these researchers had to be onto something, even if they didn't know what it was. Whatever this something was independent of the fact that they were changing the lights. The lights were dim or the lights were bright. It didn't matter. But it was dependent on the fact that they were there and they were actively taking observations. Now, of course, in these studies, the factory workers knew that the researchers were there, and they knew when the researchers left. These scientific insights into human psychology would later be formalized into what was known as the Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect simply states that when people know that they're being observed, they tend to perform better at whatever tasks they're doing. People knew that they were being observed, and so they performed better, independent of whatever was going on with the lights. And when people knew that they weren't being observed, they went back to the previous behavior. The Hawthorne effect has been observed across a number of different industries over the decades since the original studies began. And so the Hawthorne effect is certainly real. What does the Hawthorne effect have to do with tracking your personal finances? Well, in the original study, there was an external observer, right? The factory workers were being observed by the scientists that came into the factory to observe the process. In the decades since these studies, we've realized that it actually doesn't matter who the observer is, as long as the focus of the study knows that they're being observed, the Hawthorne effect can be seen. So that means that we can act as our own observers into our finances, and all we have to do is track our finances to do that. all we have to do is track our finances in order to get this result. So why does it work? Why does the Hawthorne effect work? What's going on? So the Hawthorne effect works because it introduces accountability. We're all familiar that there are versions of ourselves that don't really have a particular interest whether or not we accomplish the financial goals that we set out to do. But when you track your finances, you essentially create another version of you that does care about the outcomes you want. Now, there's a version of you that doesn't care, then there's a version of you that does, and they're always going to be in conflict. But now there are at least two of them, right? Now that you track your finances, the second one also exists. Most of the time, in the beginning, you're still going to choose the version of you that doesn't particularly care for the outcomes that you want, and you're not going to get the outcomes. But now that that second version of you exists, you're going to start choosing the path that allows you to accomplish your goals. When there are these two versions of you, every decision has to be made twice. The first decision is whether or not you care on this particular day and instance, whether or not you're being observed. And then the second decision is what will you do now that you know that you are being observed? And about 80% of the time in the beginning, you'll pick the result that you've always picked, right? You'll perform the same behavior that you would have performed otherwise. But in a very small percentage of opportunities, you'll start choosing the different behavior. And over time, if you observe this process often enough, if you track your finances for often enough, you'll find yourself picking the alternative behavior more often. And once you do that for long enough, you'll see that these small changes in your behavior, I was going to buy this product, but I'm actually not going to, or maybe I'll buy a cheaper alternative, or maybe I truly don't need this and I'm just not going to buy it at all. You start making those decisions more often, and those decisions, they stack up over time. And so because you track your finances over the course of a month, you're going to see the results of that. Or over the course of 2 months or 3 months, you're definitely going to see the results of that. And what that does is that it produces a positive reinforcement for you. And when you have that positive reinforcement, it encourages you to take more action on purpose towards the outcomes that you want. Now that's a positive momentum that you can get just from simply tracking your finances and being aware that your finances are being tracked in the background. And so this is how we can get the benefits of the Hawthorne effect, simply by tracking our finances and not really doing anything with the data other than knowing that the data is being tracked and being aware of it, and then maybe occasionally looking at that data. So the TLDR is that people perform better at a task when they know that they're being observed at that task, even if the observer is themselves. So let's talk about another benefit of tracking your finances. So tracking your finances, right? The level 1 benefits we've talked about, they're known as the Hawthorne effect, the ability to improve your performance by simply knowing that you're being observed. That's level 1. Level 2 is what we're going to talk about next. In level 2, we're actually going to start using that data. When you use the financial data that you collect to improve your outcomes, this is known as feedback. And so here's my question to you. How often do you get feedback about your finances? So if you're like the person that I described in the beginning, you somewhat know what you earn, you somewhat know what you spend. It's possible that you may not be getting any feedback about your personal finances. And so my second question to you would be, if you're not getting any feedback about how you're doing, then how do you expect to improve? There's this billionaire that I follow online. His name is Ed Mylett. He's kind of one of those people with the Midas touch. Everything he touched turns to gold. So he, an entrepreneur, a speaker, a best-selling author, and he coaches some of the most high performing people on this planet. And he said something once in a podcast that I think was very profound that I would like to share with you. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, that most people only evaluate their performance once a year at New Year's. New Year's Eve, right? And this is true, right? So the only time most people think about when they achieve, whether or not they achieve their financial goals, is on New Year's Eve, and which is when they make new goals for the following year, right? The problem with that is if you start to veer off course at any point during that year, you don't get that feedback to make changes that will allow you to reach your goal potentially by the end of that year. And if you do at New Year's Eve or New Year's decide that you were not making proper progress towards your goals, you make a correction at the end of that year and you say, I'm going to do it differently starting from next year. Problem with that is you're not even going to know if that feedback, that change was actually a good one until a whole nother year has passed. So it's not a very efficient way of trying to get feedback about how you're doing. To wrap that one up, I want to talk about a metaphor. Right? In this metaphor, imagine that you're in a car and you're driving along the road and you're going to wherever you're going. Your destination in this case is, let's say, your goal, where you want to end up. And your car is your vehicle for getting to that goal. And all you have to do is drive straight. So if someone is in a car and they're driving straight, they got both hands on the wheel and they want to just kind of stay between the lines. So then my question is, what is the probability of getting to your location if you're not allowed to touch the wheel again after New Year's? Right? You set the wheel on course, you hit the gas and you go, and you never touch the wheel again. What's the probability that you'll actually stay on the road? It's zero. And anybody that's driven a car understands that that's the case, right? When you're driving in the car, you're always making small corrections to try to stay within the lines. You do that every few seconds, let alone once a year. You're almost guaranteed to veer off the road and into the grass, at least out of the lines, if you don't always have that positive feedback. And you tracking your finances and you using that data to make a change is the same as when you veer too far to the left, turning the steering wheel to the right. And the more often you do that, the more rapid that feedback is, the more likely you are to make corrections in time for them to matter at the end of the year, right? A budget is about restricting the purchases of the things that you actually want. But tracking your finances and getting that rapid feedback is simply about making sure that that the things you're paying for now are things that you actually want to pay for. Every time I go through this experiment with somebody, they always find some things that they're paying for that they're not aware that they're paying for. So simply going through this effort of getting rapid feedback about your finances can allow you to eliminate a lot of things that you're paying for, but that you don't want to pay for. This realization just allows you to cut spending in undesirable areas. So just like that, you already have some savings from the observations and the human psychology changes from the Hawthorne effect, but then also this rapid feedback that you're getting as you evaluate your budget on a regular basis. You get to see whether or not you're spending on things that you actually want to spend on. And if you're not, then you can reduce spending in those areas. So that already produces saving and no budget is required to do that. The TLDR is that the more rapid feedback that you get on your personal finances, the more likely you are to make changes in the proper direction. Most of the high performers in this world, they always track their progress towards a goal. And they don't track it once a year or even twice a year. They may evaluate their performance on a monthly, a weekly, or even a daily basis. I've personally been tracking my finances for about 5 years. And I can just say in my mind, when I do the comparison between how I'm doing with my finances now and how I was doing with my finances back then, of course I have nothing to compare it to because I wasn't tracking the data back then. But I know that my performance has been way better over the time frame that is much closer to present day, and it's not even close. I track my finances on a daily basis, but that doesn't mean that I look at them on a daily basis. The information is just available to me on a day-by-day breakdown if I need that level of specificity. So let's say that I've convinced you that tracking your finances may be something that is at least worth attempting, right? You hear about the benefits of the Hawthorne effect, the abilities of knowing that you're simply just being observed. And you hear about the benefits of being able to have that rapid feedback and being able to trim these excess pieces of your spending off of spending that maybe you don't even know that you're spending. If you see potentially some benefit in that, then maybe you want to track your finances. The best way to do that is to use a bunch of financial apps that are available that track all this data for you so that you don't have to do it. So next we're going to talk about what those apps are and kind of some general overview of them and how they work. So the apps that are most currently used to track people's finances, I'll give you the 3 that are most used, and I'll give you the one that I also use. So the first of the 3 that I want to briefly discuss is called Personal Capital, or Empower is its new name. The company had gotten bought out a couple of years ago, and so they went through a rebranding. But the overall app is still the same. So Personal Capital allows you to track your net worth, your income, your expenses, among a lot of other different things. Mint, which is made by a company called Intuit. Intuit makes other apps known as QuickBooks, which is used for small business owners. And they also make TurboTax, which is used for simple tax solutions for people. So this is a reputable company that it has many years and a lot of experience in the industry. Third app's called YNAB. YNAB, Y-N-A-B, short for You Need a Budget. But the app does a lot of other things as well, as far as checking your income, your net worth, and all these other things. All 3 apps are good. Of the 3, I've used Personal Capital, and I continue to use Personal Capital now. I've been using it for 5 years. I've also used Mint. I've used Mint for a number of years, and that app is very good as well. I hear YNAB is very good as well, though, although I haven't tried that one. All 3 of these apps are free-ish. Personal Capital is 100% free. Personal Capital / Empower is 100% free. Mint has a free tier and a non-free tier. YNAB has a free 30-day trial and then a month-by-month charge after that. But these are the 3 apps that are most commonly used for this, for tracking people's finances. I'm not going to get into the particulars of how the apps work today because that could be an entire video in itself. But look into these apps, do some research, look up the reviews, see how people use them, and then see which one you may particularly want to try. When you use these apps, you get access to plots like these that show you your income, your expenses, and your net cash flow. And then it also has like some budgeting features as well. So this is the budgeting features that you would see in Personal Capital. This is kind of how it tracks that data. This is how Mint kind of tracks that data. It breaks it down on itemization basis. So like transaction by transaction, but also category of spending. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do. I'm going to have another video on the breakdown of these apps and how to use them and to compare them for different types of users. So look out for that. But overall, definitely consider the apps. If you're not really an app person or a tech savvy person, you can also use spreadsheets for this. I do know some people who do that. But in my experience, if you're not already using spreadsheets for kind of everyday things, people are not likely to use spreadsheets to do this either. So definitely consider the apps, do some research, and maybe give one or two of them a try. So the last thing I'll say about the apps is the app that I'm using, right, Personal Capital / Empower. They collect all of the financial data for the users that use their app, and they compile it anonymously. And then they do comparisons between their internal group of users and the general population with regards to income and net worth and the overall health of their personal finances. And I think that there's a lot of value that we can kind of extract from that, right? What type of people use these types of apps, right? So I actually have some of that compiled data from Personal Capital that they make public. Of course, it's all anonymous data, so there's no one's names in it, but it's just, averages and means and stuff like that. But we can still gather a lot of information just from looking at that data. So let me read some of that data for you. The median 401k balance for someone in their 20s, right? This is the average American 401k balance for someone in their 20s is $14,000. That same group in their 20s, their average 401k balance is over $32,000. So let's go to the next age group. The median 401k balance for someone in their 30s over the general American population is $36,000. That same group, represented on Personal Capital, has a median 401k balance of $76,000. Let's go to the age group above that. So the median 401k balance for someone in their 40s, these are our older millennials, is $61,000, right? That's the average American 401k balance for someone in their 40s. That same group, as represented on Personal Capital, among people in their 40s, has a median 401k balance of over $160,000. Last one. These are our Gen X's, people in their 50s. Median 401k balance for general population is $90,000 for that age group. Not bad. The same group represented on Personal Capital, median balance is over $250,000. So what is happening here? Every age group, the Gen Zs, the young millennials, the older millennials, the Gen X's, and the boomers, I didn't put that data in there, but it's true for the boomers as well. All of them have at least a factor of 2 difference higher in their average 401k balances. Well, why might that be the case? Well, 2 of the reasons are things that we've talked about already. We've talked about the Hawthorne effect and that things that get observed are more likely to be improved. And we also talked about rapid feedback, right? If something is going wrong, you can easily course correct back on the right track very quickly. But there's this third thing that we haven't really discussed yet, and it's a factor of human behavior. And it turns out that people who have assets are more likely to care how those assets are performing, right? That's probably not a surprise. But did you know that the opposite is also true? That people who care are more likely to have assets to care about, right? So you have these 2 things. One is, if I have assets, then I care about how they're performing. And the other one is, if I care, then I'm more likely to have assets to care about. Which of those 2 things are in your control? You can't control whether you have assets, not in the beginning, but you can control whether you care. And if you care today, then you're more likely to have assets that you will care about their performance, and you can kind of move up and on in that way. And so that's kind of what my general advice would be, right? If you care today, then you'll have better finances in the future. So now let's talk about foundational practice number 2. So foundational practice number 2 is a compelling vision. So the common financial advice is that you should save because, well, it's just the right thing to do, right? You have an emergency fund. That means that you don't have to go into credit card debt when a lump sum payment comes up, car breaks down, something like that. Or, saving for retirement. You should save for retirement because then that means that you're going to have a comfortable living in retirement once you no longer have any income. All of that is fine. All of that is true. The problem is that your brain doesn't care about any of that, right? Emergencies are something we wish never happened. Retirement seems so far away. Your brain really can't identify with it. It reminds me of something that I read a few years ago. I wish I could find it for you. If I find it, I'll link it in the comments. But it was this study that was done by scientists. And what they did is they would hook up people to these MRI machines and observe patterns in their brain. And and as they were hooked up to these MRI machines, they would show people a series of pictures, and they would see how their brain lit up, what areas of the brain lit up. So it seems from the report that I read that different areas of your brain light up when you see people that you recognize versus when you see people that you don't recognize. And so they showed them a series of pictures, right? Who's this? Oh, that's my brother. Oh, who's this? Oh, that's my spouse. Oh, who's this? This person's a stranger, right? One part of the brain lights up when you see somebody you recognize. A different part of the brain lights up when you see someone you don't recognize. And so they showed them these pictures, and the different parts of the brain would light on and off. And then they showed them this last picture. And in this last picture was a digitally aged version of themselves, maybe 25, 30 years older. What part of the brain do you think lit up when they saw these digitally aged versions of themselves? That's right, stranger category. Turns out, for whatever reason, our brains cannot identify our older versions of us, significantly older versions of us, as us. Now, this is particularly a difficult problem for future you, because future you is relying on present day you to set them up for success. But present day you does not identify with future you as a part of them. So your brain doesn't see future you as you. So current day you cannot sacrifice for future day you, because we don't really see that as us. That's a weird problem, but it is a problem that is fairly easy to get around if you know how. The way that you get around this problem of not being able to sacrifice for the future is that you don't, right? You only focus on the things that are most important to you at this moment. Your brain cannot identify with a version of you that is 30 years older than you are currently. But your brain can identify with you today and what you want today. Your brain can also identify with versions of you that are very close to you in age, i.e. these are versions of you that are the version of you that is 2 days from now, the version of you that is a week from now, a version of you that is a month from now, and a version of you that is a year from now, not 20 years. It's too abstract for the human brain, so it turns out. Right? So let me paint a metaphor for you. So let's pretend like you're one of those paper origami things, right? Where you have the people, they have the cutout, and then they have the people, and when you spread open like this, you have all the people kind of locking arms like that. The metaphor is that pretend that you are one of the people in that paper chain, and you are connected at the arms with on one side, you're connected to the younger version of you, and on the right-hand side, you're connected to the older version of you. So for example, I'm 30 as of right now. So I'm connected at one arm to the 29-year-old version of me, and I'm connected at the other arm to the 31-year-old version of me, right? I know what 30-year-old me wants most, so I'm going to pursue that. And that thing is very close to the thing that 29-year-old me also wanted to pursue. It's also very close to what the 31-year-old version of me also wanted to pursue. We all have a lot in common because we're so close together, right? I can identify with them. They can identify with me. And so 29-year-old me can work to 30-year-old me's goal. And I can work to 31-year-old me goal, 31-year-old me's goal. But I can't work towards 60-year-old me's goal, right? That's like if I'm in a chain of people like this and I look down, I can't see him, right? He's 30 people down. I can't see him. I don't know what he wants. He probably wants something completely different from life than what I want now. So it doesn't make sense for me to try to plan for his future. I can plan for my own future, and I can plan for 31-year-old me's future. I can give him something to start with so that he can plan for 32-year-old me's future, and so on and so on and so forth. And if every person in that chain successfully achieves whatever goal they set out to do that year, then the 60-year-old version of me all the way at the end is going to have the resources that he needs to create whatever type of life he wants. And I think that that's just a better way of pursuing it, and it works with what we know about how the human brain works, is that we can only truly pursue things that we actually want to do. And you actually want to do the things that are most important to you now, not the things that are abstracted 20 or 30 years down the line. This is a better approach to pursuing long-term goals that's a lot easier for the human brain to handle, and it produces the same outcomes, which is the important part. So how would you start to pursue this idea of going about it in this way, right? I talked about, what does present you want? What do you actually want, right? So that's my question to you, is like, what do you want? Another way to ask that question is, if life could be what you wanted it to be, what would it look like, right? And so I gave this some thought about what the compelling vision might look like, how to assist people in finding what their compelling vision is. And so I came up with some parameters that all compelling visions have, and hopefully this helps you find what your compelling vision is that you should pursue on a daily basis right now towards your long-term financial goals, whatever that is. So the first parameter of a compelling vision is that it has to be meaningful. What does something mean when it's meaningful, right? It means that it has to move the needle. It has to be something that you can measure as progress. In other words, imagine that once you've, in some alternative universe, when you've actually accomplished this thing, whatever it is, that you will be able to look back at all of the sacrifices that you made over that time period, and you'll still be able to say that despite the fact that I had to sacrifice so much in order to accomplish this goal, that it was still worth doing. If a goal is meaningful, then it will be emotionally compelling. And if it's emotionally compelling, then you're more likely to stick with it. You'll actually feel like you are moving in the proper direction. Okay, so the second parameter of a compelling vision is that it has to be within the realm of realism. So what does that mean? It means, simply put, that the goal can neither be too difficult or too easy. If the goal is too easy, then it cannot be meaningful because you already know that you can do it, and it will not move the needle if it's easy. If the goal is too difficult, then you're going to become overwhelmed by the thought of doing it, and then you won't do anything. So the goal has to be appropriately difficult. So let me give you an example. So let's say your goal is to save $100 a month, right? And now that would be a worthwhile goal, and it would be something that is appropriately difficult if, let's say, you were cash flow negative, right? You had credit card debt, you didn't have any extra left over at the end of the month. Then getting to $100 a month is all of a sudden a compelling vision, because now it gives you something meaningful to work towards that is also within the realm of possibility. But if you were already saving more than $100 a month, if some of the time, then the goal of saving $100 a month is not compelling. So then that would not be a good goal for someone who for which that goal would be too easy. Now let's look at the other side of that. Let's say you're able to save $100 a month, and you want to be as rich as Jeff Bezos, who I think is worth over $200 billion as of the making of this video, right? The gap between saving $100 a month and being worth $200 billion a month is just so vast that you wouldn't even know what action you'd have to take in order to start to pursue that goal. And so you would just get overwhelmed by the thought of trying to do it, and you just wouldn't do anything, right? Even Jeff Bezos didn't know he'd be Jeff Bezos. I don't care what anybody says, right? The 1995 version of Jeff Bezos had no idea that he'd reach the level of financial success that he has now. You can't plan for that, because the gap between 1995 Jeff Bezos and 2024 Jeff Bezos is so wide, you just couldn't do it. All you can do is set a vision before you that is achievable, that is approachable, and if it's achievable and approachable, then the steps to pursue it will be clear, and it'll be interesting, exciting, and compelling. If the goal is appropriately difficult, it means that you will be forced to learn and grow as a result in order to pursue this goal, right? There's an old saying that our goals, they create demands of us, right? So if you have a goal that is slightly outside of the realm of what you think is actually achievable, then you will have to grow as a person in order to become good enough to achieve whatever that goal is. And so because you have to grow in order to achieve that goal, it becomes emotionally compelling, because if you have to grow in order to pursue it, then that opens up the opportunities for you. Because if you grow as a person, now all of a sudden there's more opportunity to pursue, right? Now all of a sudden all those doors are now open to you, so that's an exciting thing to pursue. And so that is why the goal has to be not too easy and not too difficult. Parameter 3 for compelling vision is clarity, right? Whenever I ask people this question, well, what do you want? They'll say, well, I just want to be good, or I just want to have enough, or I just want to be comfortable. You love those. And I ask this question, well, what does that mean, right? Is it a particular savings goal, a certain amount of money in the bank? Is it an income goal? Be specific about what it is that you're trying to accomplish, because The clearer the goal, the clearer the pursuit of that goal will be, because it'll be clear what has to happen next in order to move towards it. Also, whenever you make a goal that is outside of your comfort zone, that is just outside of what you think is possible, what will naturally happen is that you will want to give up. But the clearer your goal is, if you can clearly manifest your goal in your mind, then you will be able to experience the emotions that you would experience when the goal is accomplished, right? Because if you can see it in your mind, then you will be able to experience it today, right? And so the clearer the goal is, the easier it is to do that. And when you eventually want to give up, which is just a natural occurrence, you won't give up because you can see that goal as clearly as you can see your own reflection in the mirror. If you get to that point of clarity and specificity, then you'll still be able to pursue even when things get difficult. The fourth parameter for a compelling vision is timeliness. So what do I mean by timeliness? Timeliness means that you have to put a date on it. There's an old expression that a goal without a plan is just wishful thinking, right? And that's true. When you put a timeline on it, you make it real and you create a sense of urgency. And like I had mentioned before, when you put real parameters to a goal, it makes demands of you. It tells you what needs to happen in order to pursue that goal in a timely fashion. And plus, once you actually have a date for what you want to do and you're clear about what you want to accomplish, then you can run the numbers. So let's say, for example, you wanted to save $1,000, right? And you can save $100 a month. Well, then you know that that's going to take 10 months, right? Or let's say you wanted to buy a home that was $500,000, and so you assume you're going to have to put 20% down. It's $100,000, and let's say you could save $500 a month. So if you could save $500 a month, how long would it take you to save $100,000? It would take you approximately 200 months, which is about 17 years. So you could say, well, that's completely out of the water. It takes too long. It's not going to work. But because you ran the numbers, you can say, okay, well, that's not going to work. 17 years not doing that, or $500 a month, can't do that. Maybe I can get an FHA loan instead, or maybe I can do PMI, right, private mortgage insurance, and I can put less than 20% down, right? But you never would have known that you would have had to pivot in these ways to kind of pursue your goal of buying a $500,000 home if you hadn't run the numbers, right? And so that's kind of the value of running the numbers, is that it tells you whether or not you're going to have to make a change to pursue your goals. As far as the timeline for making goals, it really just depends on the goal. I think in the beginning, if you're new to this idea of making a compelling vision, you shouldn't make goals that go out further than a year, right? So I have my finances tracked on a daily basis. Then I look at the reports on a monthly basis, and then I make goals for a yearly basis, and then I look every month to see how I'm stacking up with the pursuit of those goals. And that seems to work very well for me, so I would kind of recommend that. The TLDR for a compelling vision. I understand that people really don't do anything that they actually don't want to do. So the way you get around that is to actually make it something that you want to do. And the way you do that is to attach that action to some outcome you care about today. Then you break the large goal into manageable pieces and spread it across time. Because saving is a form of sacrifice and your brain needs a way to justify that sacrifice, making a sacrifice for anything without a compelling vision of the future is just meaningless suffering. It's meaningless because you don't know why you're doing it. And it's suffering because you value what you're losing more than what you're gaining by taking that action. So if you don't want to suffer while saving money, you have to change your value proposition. You have to make saving a pleasurable experience and make spending the painful experience. And the way you do that is by assigning value to your act of saving beyond the value of what you would have spent the money on. If you are successful in doing this, saving will become the default action instead of spending, and you'll be able to save without a budget. Okay, so foundational practice number 3 is ownership. Most people only want to take ownership over the things that are going well, and they do not want to take ownership over the things that are not going well. I did that well. Give me credit for it. But have you considered that the things that are not going well are going badly because you refuse to take ownership over them? No one wants to take ownership over a mess. Whoever does will have to clean it up. And that might not be fair. But whoever told you that life was fair? Now, don't get me wrong. I wish that life was fair, but I make my everyday decisions based off of what is and not what I would prefer things to be. So here's the truth. It may or may not be your fault for where you are, but it is your responsibility to fix it. It's not your parents' responsibility. It's not the responsibility of your teachers. It's not the responsibility of your employees. It's not the responsibility of your employer. It's not the responsibility of your government. And it is definitely not the responsibility of a future version of you that you left with yesterday's problems. But why is it your responsibility and not the responsibility of other people? I never explained why. The reason for that is, and I'll answer it in the form of a question. Who stands to benefit more from your success than you do? The answer is nobody. You are responsible for a disproportionate amount of the work because you will receive a disproportionate amount of the rewards. So here's the TLDR about ownership. So that doesn't mean that you will never get help of any kind from anyone. Of course you will. We all do, me included. The question is, why do you have an expectation that these people owe you something? Right? People who really accomplish things in life, they take what's known as radical ownership. They can't control every circumstance in life, but they make a real effort to control all the things that they can control. So here's the TLDR with regards to ownership. Responsibility isn't about blame. It's about directing your energy towards things that will benefit you more than anyone else. So here I show a Venn diagram. On the left side of this circle represents all of the things that are important. And on the right side of the Venn diagram, it represents all of the things that are in your control. We only focus on the overlap between these two circles, which are the things that are both important and the things that are under your control. There's no point in worrying about anything else. If you focus your energy here on this side of the circle, this is known as procrastination. Busy work, but it isn't productive. If you focus your energy here, then you are powerless. All of the power to change your life is in the hands of other people who may or may not use that power to their own benefit. So focus on the middle and take control over what can be done each and every day. Okay, so in conclusion, a budget isn't just a budget. The budget is a tool that gets you from where you are to where you want to be. But like with any tool, you don't just pick it up and start using it. You need the knowledge to wield it. This is foundational practice number 1, gives you that information. You need a purpose to wield the tool. Foundational practice number 2 gives you that. And lastly, you need the audacity to pick up the tool in the first place and believe that you can use it. Foundational practice number 3 gives you that. These foundational practices are a trifecta. They are meant to be used together. If they are not used together, nothing will take place. Once you have a compelling need in front of you, the tools that allow the goal to be pursued become clear. And it is only once you reach this point that having a budget makes sense. Thanks for watching.